Good evening. Welcome, and thank you for making time in your schedules to be here tonight, and many of you for being here at the Episcopal Church in Minnesota's Racial Justice Summit that is happening starting this evening and moving through the week. We are delighted that you are gathered here tonight. I want to start by saying that we acknowledge that we exist here on the ancestral homelands of the Ojibwe and the Ho-Chunk and the Dakota peoples in the state of Minnesota, and we are cognizant of all the ways in which that land is a gift and a trust. We also like to welcome you to this physical space, to St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church, and to Ramsey Hill neighborhood, to the historic Ramsey Hill neighborhood. My name is Jared Weber Johnson. I'm the rector here at St. John's. I use he, him pronouns. I see a lot of familiar faces tonight and some new ones, and so I'm glad you are here. I want to give a special thank you tonight because a lot of work went into making it possible for Dr. Meeks to be with us. I want to say thank you to the Episcopal Church in Minnesota's Racial Justice Commission for their hard work and planning that makes tonight's event and this whole summit possible. Lots and lots of hours and time and dollars went into making this event come about, and I would like it if we could all just express our gratitude to those folks by a round of applause. Of course, special thank you to their convener, Heidi Kim, who I'll invite in a moment to make some introductions. And I think a special thank you, too, to the staff of St. John the Evangelist, who worked hard to make sure bathrooms were clean and physical plant looked presentable and bulletins were printed. And I guess I know his colleagues will agree with this. A special thank you to the Reverend Craig Lemming, who is standing dutifully at the back doing all the things. Thank you also, Bishop Loya, for your vision for us. After listening to the Episcopal Church in Minnesota as our new bishop, you heard loud and clear there were 4 priorities that we had articulated about ourselves, and you were quick to make manifest that we should lead in our faith communities towards those 4 priorities. And you've heard them before, but they are faithful innovation, they are discipleship, they are vital communities, and they are justice. Those 4 things stand at the center of our beating heart as Episcopalians in Minnesota because they are at the center of what it means to be followers of Jesus here in this moment. And tonight, we'll be hearing about how those 4 priorities intersect with Dr. Meeks' wise and brilliant work and what it can challenge us to be and do and grow into as followers of Jesus. Finally, thank you, Dr. Meeks, for your incredible work, for your challenges to the church and to the world to be better and to do better, to be, as you have articulated, healed and made well in our hearts and minds and spirits. Tonight, there will be an opportunity at the end of our conversation for you to pick up, if you have not already read, marked, and inwardly digested the new book, The Night is Long. It's available thanks to our friends from the Cathedral Bookstore at the back of the church. And I'd like it if you would wait a few moments at the end of our conversation with Dr. Meeks that she and the bishop can make their way back there so that they can greet you at the back. And of course, Dr. Meeks would love to be able to sign your book and meet you personally if she hasn't already done so this evening. There are other opportunities coming. If you're not a part of the summit, you may want to know where else can you get to hear Dr. Meeks all this weekend. And that will happen on Sunday again. After the summit concludes, we'll have the privilege of Dr. Meeks joining us on October 1st for our 10 o'clock Eucharist here in this space as our preacher. And if you are eager to discuss the book even further, there will be a forum at 9 o'clock by the St. John's Vestry, who have been devouring this book over the course of the year, but in small bites to enjoy it and appreciate it and really gain from it what it needs. They're eager to have a conversation in this parish about what we've been learning and how it shapes our own approach to the 4 priorities. And with that, I would like to invite my esteemed colleague and a wonderful leader, Heidi Kim, who has been at the forefront of the Episcopal Church in Minnesota's Task Force for Racial Justice, Commission. Heidi, come on up and make some introductions. Thank you.
It's very ironic to hear somebody put the word esteemed in front of my name when Catherine Meeks is the featured speaker. Back in 2014, I joined presiding bishop's staff as the staff officer for racial reconciliation, and I was the first person to occupy that role. And very shortly, less than a month after I started, Michael Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri. And my job went from being kind of a theoretical challenge of what can we as the Episcopal Church do to really being on the ground with people in Ferguson, with our Episcopal parish there, with other leaders of faith, as the entire world was converging on Ferguson, Missouri. I moved to Minnesota in 2019, and once again was here for a few months, and then the entire world converged on Minneapolis, Minnesota after the murder of George Floyd. But one of the things that was a thread through all of that was that very early on I met Dr. Catherine Meeks, our mutual friend, the Reverend Chuck Winder, who some of you may know, who was the staff officer for justice and advocacy. Chuck has become friend and brother, said, "There's somebody I really need you to meet," because her song is very much like your song, which is, if we're going to talk about racial healing and justice making, we really need to be talking about spiritual formation. We need to talk about what does it mean for us as disciples, as followers of Jesus, to engage in the work of healing and dismantling racism and white supremacy, but we need to talk about it with love. We need to not get caught in secular language. We need to see this as a fundamental element of our discipleship as followers of Jesus. So I met Dr. Meeks. And very early on, I knew that this is somebody that I needed to continue to be around and learn from. So she has an amazing resume. If you haven't seen it already, just go to the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing website. She is a Presidential Lifetime Award honoree for her work in racial justice. In fact, she was awarded so many honorary doctorates this year from Episcopal seminaries that they postponed one because she just didn't have time to get to all of them. She's a scholar, she's an intellectual, she is a theologian, she is a mother, she is a friend, she is a colleague, she is a teacher, but she has been a companion in this work when it gets hard. And it gets hard in the first 5 minutes. And she is clearer than just about anybody I know about the urgency of what we are called to do as people who claim to love Jesus and who claim to love one another, who claim to be the body of Christ together with one another in all of its diversity and in all of its brokenness. And how do we do that when the house is on fire? So it is a deep and humbling honor to be able to introduce my colleague, my friend, my sister in the struggle, my mentor, my teacher, Dr. Catherine Meeks.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, good. Well, the poet David White has a lovely poem called Start Close In. And says, start close in. Start with the first thing. Start with the thing you don't want to start with. The first thing. Not the second, not the third, but the first. Start close in. And so in order to do that first, before I start trying to do something else, for me to start close in is to tell you that as I was being driven here by Heidi from dinner to here, I looked at my phone and found an email from my son saying, my car's been stolen. And he's like 45 minutes ago. And then I spoke to him and he said, well, I really want to cry, but this is my 42-year-old son that's not quite sure he knows how to cry. So I'm here and he's there. And I'm trying to get myself from there to here. So I want to know where you're trying to get yourself from. So because all of us have been in different places today, so let's start close in with how do we get in the room so that we can be present to whatever it is we do here in the next little while. But it's difficult to get in the room with all the stuff that happens in a day. And this just happened. And so, and you know, I could come and suck it up and act like I'm a big girl, but I want to tell you, the big girl wishes she was in Atlanta with her son right this minute. but I'm here. And there is a call to be faithful, to be focused, in spite of what has happened or is happening or might happen, and not to get distracted. There is a call to recognize all the disparate pieces and figure out how to get them settled so that you can do what you need to do. And so in an effort to do that, I'm going to do that, and I'm asking you to join me in doing that with whatever your thing is that would distract you and keep you out there instead of letting you be in here. So we can be in here together with those things being assured that we will not forget them, and that when we get done with this, we'll come back to them. As I said to him, I'll call you when I get finished. You know, one of the biggest problems we have in the church is that we pretend too much. We pretend that we're okay. We show up on Sunday mornings with needing new pieces of bubble gum to stick us together, but we act like we've got it all together because we don't want to come in looking like the worst person in the room when maybe we feel like the worst person in the room. And I'm lobbying for churches where I can drag myself in and somebody will say, can we give you a wheelchair? And in my case, with rheumatoid arthritis, that's not even a stretch of the imagination. I might need a wheelchair depending on how far I have to go from one place to another. I guess what I'm really saying is that the most important thing we can do is bring our authentic self to the table, whatever that self is in the moment, whatever state of being we find ourselves. We can come with our brokenness, our wounds, with our misunderstandings, with our bigotry, whatever, to this place, that's this house that we call church, but it's really just a house. And hopefully we've made it into something more by being here and being together as God's people called together. And what has all that got to do with anything? You know, that we do all of this. When we leave here and go be with people out there in the world, what does that have to do with anything? It's always my question. How does it matter when I leave this place and go out? What matters about having been here? Because those are important questions. And I think they're questions that we don't pay enough attention to. And then we wonder why we don't have much effect. Well, because we got to start close in. We got to start with the first thing, not the second thing, not the third thing. Start with the first thing, the thing we don't want to start with. And I want to tell you another story that's a little more humorous than what I've just said. There's this lovely, that I talk about in my book, actually, in a meditation that's called Look for Answers in the Right Place, because that's another thing we're real good at doing. We love to look for answers where we want to find them, so we can find the answers we want to find, rather than looking where the answer might be and asking God to help us be open to seeing the answer that we find, rather than already deciding what it ought to be and then seeing if we can hunt long enough till we find that answer. You know how you have a feeling about something, but you go talk to the folks that you know that's going to tell you what you want to hear, versus talking to the folks that might help you clarify and reimagine and redo that thought, but you don't want to ask them because that's too disruptive. So the story is that this Mullah Nasruddin was looking for his key that he lost, and it's in one of the meditations called Look for Answers in the Right Place. And his friend comes up and says to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm looking for my key." And he said, "Well, what did you lose it?" "Yeah, I lost it." And he said, "Well, let me help you. Let me help you look for it." And so he starts helping him, and they look, and he can't find the key. And finally the friend says, "Well, where did you lose the key?" And he said, "Well, I lost it in the house, but the light's better out here." The light's better out here. I might find a better answer if I ask the person that will tell me what I want to hear. But that kind of search won't lead us to the truth at all. And we have a lot of truth-telling to do in this country when it comes to a lot of things. And some of that truth-telling makes us sad, angry, find it hard to live together as human beings, and makes us wish oftentimes that there was somewhere else we could live. I have considered where else on the planet could I go? And then I decided that I know what this mess is all about, so I might as well stick around here because at least I understand this pretty well. And so as a black woman growing up, as a black child growing up in Arkansas, and as a black woman having to navigate my way in a country that would be so happy if I could just disappear, that doesn't want to make space for me or people who look like me or other people who are not white, it has been a real question of where on the planet could I go where that would not be an issue. And there is no answer to that question because I'm here. And wherever I would go, I would be other. And I would still have to deal with the being othered. So I might as well stay here because I understand the nature and manifestation of this othering and also know how to navigate my way in it a little better than I might if I were in some other place. I've been in some other places and I've seen what it means to be othered in a culture that you don't understand. So I have ended up coming to the conclusion that the issue has to be worked out in the space that I'm occupying. And one of the major questions that I've had all of my life is, what does it mean to be a free person? How would I get to be a free person in a land that told me I don't have space, I don't need to take up too much space, and I don't need to think that I have a right to equity and equality and a chance to live my life in whatever ways God said for me to live when I got sent here. My mother used to tell me all the time, don't wear red, because red is a color that announces your presence. So now I wear all the red I can find and as much of it at the same time as possible without looking junky, because I think I want to make it clear that I'm here and I know that I've got space and I intend to stand in it and stand in it with integrity and hope and faith and a commitment that hopefully makes it clear to other people that they also have space. All people, everybody on this planet is here and have space to be here, and God is glad for us to be here, and we have a right to be able to live into the life that God intended for us to have, no matter our color, gender, or whatever. And if you don't believe that, then I would ask you to consider, what kind of God do you have? Do you have a God that's made some people better than others? God, as near as I can tell, has no hierarchy of human beings, no hierarchy of value for human beings, but we set up those constructions and constraints and then decided to try to stratify life on the basis of that stuff we made up, and then we try to blame God for it. So most of the time I tell people when they start those conversations with me, let's leave God out of this. And let's take responsibility for the stuff we have done. Because it is not God's intention that little children being left at the border should have been left there. It was not God's intention for little Native children to be taken from their parents and mistreated. That was not God's intention. For little black kids to be taken away from their mothers when they were babies. When the children were being taken away at the border, people were saying, well, that's not us, that's not who we are. And I thought, have you not read any history book? How could you read any history book and not understand that is us? And it's us Episcopalians too. So we need to not have to beat ourselves up about it. We need to look ourselves in the mirror and own it. and then go on to do whatever we can do to make sure we don't do that anymore. You know, the thing, I'm so weary of people wanting to hide rather than just say, okay, I made a mess, and let me try not to make the same mess again. That works way better. James Baldwin said, you can't heal everything you can name, but you won't heal anything you don't name. So our divides, and I'll talk more later about health and wellness and all that stuff. But right now, I want to tell you, just if you haven't seen my book, The Night is Long, but Light Comes in the Morning, Meditations for Racial Healing. I love this notion, and I love the notion, the inherent message in that we don't know which morning light's coming, but it's coming. That's the promise. Weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And if you think that it's tomorrow, then you might be quite mistaken. And when it comes to race, we want it to be tomorrow. We want to be done with it. How many times have I heard, why are we still talking about this? Didn't we fix this already? Didn't we have a black president? Didn't we? No, we did have a black president, sort of. You know, we tried hard not to, but some people didn't ever get the message, I don't think. And we started this silly conversation about us being a post-racial world. I mean, that was one of the silliest conversations that I've ever heard, given the fact that we were so stratified. And one of the other things that we have done is we have structured our society and created a narrative that made white people think that racism really hadn't hurt them. That we, the people of color, the Native people, the Latinx people, the Asian people, the African American people, we were the people who were the victims. We were the ones who were hurt. But you cannot be in such a system as the one we have created and be a part of it and own it and live into that narrative without being injured yourself. And if you've not read Wendell Berry's The Hidden Wound, I would invite you to read it. It is very illustrative in terms of helping to get at the core of some of that. And so what do wounded people do? You own your wounds and you find fellow pilgrims to be with. And I want to talk now a little bit about the difference between being an ally and being a fellow pilgrim, because that's another place where it's easy to hide. I've heard so much talk from white people across the United States about being allies. And it sounds so good, you know, we're just gonna go be allies with these struggling folks. Well, let me read a little bit. Ponder this. If you were dying, who would you prefer to be accompanying you on the journey? An ally or a fellow pilgrim? A fellow pilgrim is one who holds you in their hands and shares your pain and joy to the very best of their ability, no matter whatever it requires. This person is willing to walk in your shoes in order to understand how you see the world. The fellow pilgrim's commitment is to hold the difficult, regardless of what it costs to do so. There is no thought of abandoning the relationship because it is clearly a connection at the soul level and will not be broken by external circumstances that might cause inconvenience. The ally is quite a bit different. Allies have decided to unite with those in some type of struggle, and they have a variety of reasons for doing so. They will be present to the particular portion of the struggle that called them into it, but there may not be a soul-deep commitment that's grounded in true empathy. That empathy and commitment are essential to help create a space for sustainable racial healing. one of the serious issues that comes in this kind of construction is the inability, oftentimes, for there to be an expression of real empathy. To really know, my son, the one whose car was stolen, used to be, he has a bald head, and he used to drive an old car. He got a better car now, it's stolen, so he'll probably get an old car again. But he looked like he might be somebody the police would be interested in, just because he looked different. So he would be stopped a lot, and I was just livid about it. And I was writing commentaries for the newspaper, so I would write about this police harassment. And people would write in the response to me, the police are just doing their job, and basically wanted me to shut up. But I wasn't planning on doing that. And then also writing, wanting me, well, they're just doing their job, so don't worry about it. Other people would be trying to make me feel better about it. The real truth is what I needed was people who were just willing to be present to me in it, who were willing to just say, yeah, it's scary, it's horrible, and we can't, you and I aren't going to be able to fix it. We still haven't fixed it. That still goes on. But what I needed is a pilgrim friend who isn't afraid to suffer with me. Are you willing to suffer with me? Are you willing to be empathetic? Are you willing to put yourself in my shoes rather than try to get me to abandon my shoes and make you feel better? My job is not to do that. My job is to be truthful about where I am. And then if you want to be with me, you will need to be with me where I am. Some of the stuff that we say to people when things are hard, we need to keep to ourselves. Because basically all we're trying to do is make ourselves feel better, and we need to either go be with them where they are or just go somewhere else. I mean, we're not required to go where we can't go. To be really empathetic means I'm willing to suffer with you. I'm willing to be in this pain with you. So if you want to be really a pilgrim with me on this journey, I don't want allies. I don't need allies. I don't want them. I want to look around and know you're still there when the going gets tough. And not that you took off because today you needed to go do something else. But you are sticking around, and you're sticking around for the long haul. Now, the other side of the coin is that people of color have to be willing to let white people be a pilgrim with them. Because in order to have a pilgrim friend, you have to trust them. A little bit, anyway. Enough to build trust. Because trust doesn't happen, nothing is magic about all this. That's the other thing. We just like little kids. We want magic so badly. And we think we get something started, and it ought to be done by the end of the day, or else there's a problem. It's not magic. It's day by day, little bit by little bit. And as my poet friend David White says, we become a half a shade braver, and we go a little bit deeper, and we go a little bit further. And yeah, you'll make a mess. You won't be perfect. But what friendship is perfect? Tell me the perfect relationship where nobody ever gets pissed off at each other. You got one of those? If you do, stand up and tell us about it, because we never heard of it. So, okay, just because race is in it, it's got to be perfect. We get caught up in acting like race is something that supersedes humanity. Race is a part of the definition of who I am, but underneath, if we could skin this outer coating off, we kind of all be bloody people sitting here, pretty much looking alike, right? So yes, it's important for you to look at me and you know you're looking at a black woman. For God's sake, don't tell me you don't see race. I mean, that just is not a sentence to use in my presence. Because you do. We always see what color somebody is, what race we think they are. But you say quickly in your head, that is only a simple fact, like she's got on glasses or she wears a scarf or she's, that's a factor. It is a fact. But what is important is what is inside my heart and what's in your heart. And can we discover one another's heartbeat? And when we listen to the heartbeat, we hear the same sound. Because everybody's heart beats. I don't know if you've watched that silly little junkie movie called The Beast of the Southern Wild. I mean, it was a pretty pitiful little movie, but it had some good points. And the best point was a little hush puppy girl that would go around listening to the heartbeat of everything. And she listened to a human heart, she listened to a bird heart, she listened to the heart of everything, and she said, everything, she discovered the world. Everything's got this heart that beats, and it connects us. So if you want to talk about being on this journey together, going toward racial healing, going toward being who God put us on the earth to be, allyship should not be really a part of your aspiration. What should be a part of your aspiration is how do we go together as fellow pilgrims. As fellow pilgrims. And we, people of color, black, brown, whatever, cannot be sitting somewhere saying, white folks can't be my pilgrim friend. I mean, it works both ways, and that's the thing that gets in the way. We get into, I get caught in my corner where being a victim is more important than going on the journey. And white people get caught in the corner of maintaining a supremacist stance that's more important than going on the journey. And then we can't go together. We have to decide that taking the journey toward being who God put us on the earth to be is more important than either being supremacist or victim. And we have to deal with that ourselves. Nobody can do that for you. You have to, it's an intention thing. Turn my attention toward, is this journey toward being a spiritually grown-up human being more important than sitting over here in my corner and holding on to whatever it is that I'm holding on to? And racism cannot go with you. There is no room for it on the journey. And somehow we have to be trying to extricate ourselves from that. And we do that by being together. We do that by owning what we need to own. And I can't be without being willing. As a black woman, I have to be willing to tell the best truth I can tell. We have spent way too much time in this country with black people trying to be okay in white spaces, acceptable. Those days are gone. We need to be willing to tell the truth. And we need to be loving and kind while we're doing it. The most loving thing we can do for one another is bring our authentic self to the table with the best truth we can find. That's it. Isn't it something? It sounds so simple, doesn't it? And it's so hard. Because some days I don't really know where to find that person. And some days it's real clear. And on the clear days, I need to capture it. And I read this lovely thing the other day that a friend is somebody who remembers your song, and when you forgot it, they can sing it to you. That's a fellow pilgrim. That's the person that I have a couple of those in my life, a handful of them, and I like having them. One of them is a white woman that I've known for 50 years, who's my children's godmother. And we call each other up and cry about my kids, my worry about them getting killed by the cops just because they happen to be black, or my concern about whatever. You know, on some days when I'm having a bad time, I can call her. And we just will lament about it, bitch about it, moan about it, and then hold each other's hands and go down the road. Because we are pilgrims together. So I ask you, somebody help me with the time here, because I started talking and I don't know what time it is anymore. You'll help me with the time? So how much more time? 5 more minutes? Okay. So I've got time to say this. So the notion of, having somebody to go with you when you're kind of walking in this space, that's scary. It is a scary space. There is no question for me about that. But it's more frightening not to do it. It's way more frightening. And the last thing I'll say about this before we get into my talking with Bishop Loya and then us maybe talking a little bit together, is that the earth, the sustainability of the earth depends upon us doing this work. The earth is not going to keep on taking our nonsense. It's making that clear to us. And if we don't believe it, all we got to do is keep on living. Like my mama used to say, when she'd tell you something and you look at her like you didn't, I look at her like I thought she was crazy, and she'd just look at me and say, just keep living. Because she knew what she was talking about. And for God's sake, I've turned into her, because now I say that stuff myself, just keep living. Well, just keep living, and you'll see, that there's just a lot of divisiveness and silliness that makes it difficult for there to be a pathway for us to stand. But we have an understanding of ourselves as people that are committed to faith, to a faith perspective, and that gives us a place to stand. That gives us some ground to stand on that makes it possible for us to be willing to take a chance. That maybe if I reach my hand out to you, that I will find that there is a hand there, and it'll be a pilgrim. It'll be somebody waiting to say, oh yeah, I have been waiting for you, and because I want to walk on this journey with you across all kinds of lines, black, brown, indigenous, gay, straight, rich, poor, educated, uneducated. We don't get to have this hierarchical structure that we have created to keep ourselves separated from one another. Race is the one we're talking about this weekend, but there's so many of them. And they're all excuses to keep from doing the work that we need to be doing. And tomorrow night we'll talk more about healing than tonight. But tonight I just want to, if you don't take anything else from this tonight, if you are a black or brown person, take that you have to be open to having a pilgrim friend. If you're a white person and you don't consider yourself on a pilgrimage with people of color, then ask yourself, what are you doing? What are you doing? And why are you doing whatever it is you're doing? It's important to interrogate that, because that is the first step toward building something that can be sustainable. We all need to ask, why have we been talking about this for all these years and we're still in this mess we're in? Obviously, we've not been asking enough of the right questions or saying enough of the right things. And I do think God would like it if we could get on with it. It would be maybe a real blessing to us and a real blessing to all of creation. Is this a good time to stop? Okay. Thank you.
But wait, there's more. Thank you, Dr. Meeks. And now we come to that portion of the evening where we will have our own Bishop, Craig Loya, come and join us. Bishop X, the 10th bishop in the Episcopal Church in Minnesota. A person who, if you're an Episcopalian in Minnesota, he needs no introduction, but as I said before, listened carefully through the search process that brought him to us and discerned 4 priorities that were clear about where we were headed. And I want to thank Bishop Loya for being here tonight, because I think one of the things we've discovered about him is that he holds those priorities in his person. So he's a disciple who leads other disciples. He is not afraid to innovate. If you say, I've got an idea, he'll say, yeah, try it. It's okay. And if you fail, it's not a big deal. And justice has been at the forefront of his ministry in a way that makes us all proud, but also calls us to do better and act higher and follow the better angels of our nature. And we're just really grateful to have you and Dr. Meeks together in conversation tonight. Can we welcome Bishop Loya?
As I know both of you, and I've had, this is Heidi again, sorry, up here. And I've spoken with both of you for years now about how these things intersect: faithful innovation, discipleship, congregational vitality, and justice. And one of the things that I notice in the Episcopal Church is that we like to intellectualize all 4 of those things. And by doing so, we kind of secularize all 4 of those things. So I'd just love to hear from each of you how you see the sort of positive interdependence of those 4 things, particularly as they relate to dismantling racism, white supremacy, and engaging in racial healing.
I've been talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and it's wonderful to be with you. I'm so grateful to have Dr. Meeks with us this weekend in the diocese. I'll probably have more opportunity tonight to say this, but I have learned so much from her in the last several years, like so many of us around the church have. And so it's a real treat. We were joking at dinner that I was leaving my house this morning, and as I was driving out of my garage, I was thinking about tonight, and I thought, have I never met Dr. Meeks in person? And it's like, it turns out that both of us were thinking that, like, we've talked a lot, but this is the first time we've been together in 3 dimensions. So I'm really, really grateful to be here with you. In terms of the 4 priorities and how they intersect, I mean, I think, actually Jared and the folks at St. John's have a really great way of framing it that I won't be able to quote. But I heard that when I was here for their annual meeting. You know, I think as it relates to the work of justice, to me, discipleship, meaning apprenticing our lives to the way of Jesus, tethering ourselves, heart, mind, body, and soul, to the power of God, is the foundation of everything that we do. And so other priorities like justice is the inevitable fruit that comes from faithful discipleship. So in other words, in my imagination, when we are faithfully yoking our lives to the way of Jesus, we will inevitably find ourselves participating in God's work of justice in the world. And I think that's true for our other priorities as well. I think that vital communities and faithful innovation, those come as the natural fruits of creativity and new life when we're living and knowing what it is like to be caught in a tangible and recognizable way in the power of God's Spirit in our lives.
So, yeah, I agree with that, but I want to say, too, that there's a lot of noise that gets in the way of even knowing how to do that. And so I think particularly in the Episcopal Church, too many people don't have any understanding of who Jesus is. And so to get yoked to Jesus is going to be difficult because you don't know what that even means. When people argue that, you know, we shouldn't care about little kids at the border, that's social. They don't want to hear sermons about that because that's social justice stuff, and they don't want to hear that. They don't understand what discipleship is, because there's no way you cannot understand, if you really understand who Jesus is, what the connection is between Jesus and those little kids sleeping outdoors at the border. So I love these notions, because it really is about life has to be lived in this holistic way that's connected, where you know, justice is not some thing out there. It is about your spiritual formation. It is about our spiritual journeys. It is about our spiritual health. And to separate those things mean we need a new understanding of Jesus. Part of why Jesus was so powerful wasn't just because he was magical. It was because Jesus was connected to all of the things that made him authentic and gave him a sense of understanding how all of life was put together. I think we missed that. I think we missed that. And so that we miss that in many ways, but we have to work on how do we get that together. But in order to work on it, we need to understand what it is we're trying to get together. And that, to me, is part of the work that has to be done, because it's difficult to be connected to somebody or something if you don't have a clear understanding of what it is you're trying to be connected to. And then it's difficult because Jesus does not make it easy. I mean, there's that stuff in the Bible about my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I don't know who Jesus is trying to fool. That is not true. It is not easy. It is challenging, and we need each other in order to do it. And we need to have this understanding of all of the things that we're trying to do as an institution don't matter unless they're going on that path to spiritual formation and connected to Jesus. Jesus should be there with us. So I guess for me, the question becomes kind of, what is it that I think I'm doing? I mean, why do I think I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing? And where is the energy? Where is what's the organizing principle for me that gets me to be going on that path, to be looking to find out what is spiritual formation? I've been just dumbfounded that people were surprised that spiritual formation and racial healing had something to do with each other. That was a huge surprise to me, that concept had never been really put together, those two concepts. It was as if, we do holy stuff in here, and then we do social justice stuff out there. Mm-hmm. Well, if we don't do social justice stuff in here and holy stuff out there, if we don't do it all together, we're on a funny track. We're on a funny track. And I think we need to get that straight, because poor priests are having a hard time in the churches trying to tell the truth to parishioners who don't understand what the truth is. So then you get your, like one of my priest friends got reprimanded at the end of service for doing a prayer for the children at the border because they took that as a political thing. That's not that's not a good thing. You don't get the connection. That's not politics. What do you think Jesus would have been doing? Actually, Jesus wouldn't have been in the church to hear the prayer. Jesus would have been at the border. That's, for me, and I'm convicted. Why am I not at the border? I'm not going to sit here and be on some horse about some priest saying God be with them. I'm here in the pew saying I should be with them. Because how's God going to get there if I don't go? Mm-hmm. So I don't know, Heidi. You never should have asked me that question, because you get me off on this.
Well, I wanted that answer, though.
Yeah, because
So now I have a follow-up question. Bishop Loya, one of the things that you said early on in one of your Bishop X forums that really struck me and has resonated with me every day since then is you had said, when I truly believe, when I'm firmly ensconced in my own belovedness, that I am beloved by God, then I am not threatened by the strength of the other. Rather, I am drawn towards it. I want to be in relationship with it. And that I felt really sort of convicted of my own ability to be thinking about the frustrations of ending up in this place of allyship rather than being grounded in my belovedness so that I'm available to be a fellow pilgrim. Mm-hmm. Why is it that so many people, I mean, I'd love to pick on the Episcopal Church, but I think it's true for many people of faith, of many, many different faith backgrounds, to fall out of that understanding of our own belovedness and wanting to do the justice thing as this sort of externalized piece so that we don't have to actually engage in that vulnerability of being the pilgrim who suffers with. Say something smart about that.
When I'm sitting next to Dr. Meeks, I'm not sure I'm capable of saying something smart. That's a big, well, but I think you're exactly right. I mean, what I would say is that part of the reason we have such a hard time doing the fundamental spiritual work of accepting our own deep belovedness is because of how white supremacy has shaped all of us, right? Because God, with God, in God's economy, there's always enough. Someone else's good is not a threat to me because there is enough. White supremacy says there is not enough, that only some get to have what they need. And so when I'm being conditioned by white supremacy, when any of us are being conditioned by white supremacy, I see life as a competition, as a zero-sum game where there's a chance that I'm not going to have enough. And when I'm doing my work of being deeply grounded in the fact that I am more deeply cherished and beloved by God than I can imagine, and the kicker is, I didn't do anything to earn it, and I can't do anything to lose it. And when I really believe, which in my 20 years of being a pastor, that is literally the hardest thing for anyone to believe. Yeah. It isn't some point of doctrine. It's the fact that you don't actually earn God's love. And when I can really feel that in my body and in my bones, then I'm liberated to be a fellow pilgrim because I know there's enough. And in fact, not only is someone else's good doesn't take anything away from me, the good of the other is good for me. You know, I'm enriched by the good of the other, and I can live my life actively seeking it. See, now you've got me going, Heidi. So I'll stop. But that's at least a first pass at an answer that it's so critically important. And maybe the last thing I would say, Dr. Meeks said, you know, following the way of Jesus is not easy, and she's exactly right. And one of the reasons it's not easy is because to do what I'm talking about means I have to set my own agenda of how the world is supposed to work or how my life is supposed to be. I've got to set that to the side, and I have to yoke myself to God's agenda. And that actually requires a certain death inside of me. But the good news is that death is the only way that I can find real healing in life.
And we've told ourselves, we've been raised on narratives that were not true. You know, the narrative, all of us have been told a bunch of lies about a few things that we have to get over. And it's difficult to let it go, because if you let the lie go, then maybe the original teller of the lie, you're scared you got to let them go too. So our mothers and fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers taught us some stuff. And some of it was not good. Some of it, like God didn't, you got to be scared to death of God. Well, I don't know why I got to be scared of God. You know, there's some line in the prayer book that says I'm an unworthy servant. I refuse to say it. I'm worthy. I belong to you, God. I'm your daughter. And I deserve you to take care of me. And you promised me that's what you're doing. Now, I'm taking you up on it. And if I can't trust you, then what do? You know? So I grew up being told that there wasn't enough, that I wasn't enough, and that I needed to be careful and keep my head down and stay out of the way and don't take up too much space. And I said, I don't believe it. You know, it's taken me, I'm 77. It's taken me all of these years of saying, no, you don't get to tell me that. It doesn't seem right. And I keep on having to say it, but I have this little inner child that's still not quite sure. So she has to be, I have to stay in conversation with her, or she will run over me and make me believe that, oh, you're gonna go in that room? Those people aren't gonna like you? I don't care. Because the warrior woman says it's okay. So the little girl gets to come, and she gets to find out that y'all won't eat her. So there's got to be this conversation that with the stuff that's messing us up, but we got to be willing to know that we're in that conversation. And I think that our culture, our churches, too many places don't help us know that we even need to be in that conversation. We think we're supposed to be okay. I mean, you know, somehow you're supposed to get that way. I don't know how you're supposed to get okay, except that you work at it. And I was leading a clergy conference for Lutherans earlier in the week, and somebody said to me, how do you do this? And I said, a whole lot of therapy, a whole lot of spiritual direction, a whole lot of listening to stuff that comes toward you. You know, if you listen to some of the stuff that comes and take it as a lesson, a message, rather than blaming somebody out there, we can learn some things about ourselves that can be helpful in getting us on the path to really follow Jesus Christ. I'm supposed to talk about being well tomorrow, so I don't want to say too much about that tonight, but because if you come back tomorrow, I don't want you to think you heard the same talk, even though you can't ever hear too much talk about being well, because it's a challenge to work on that. But isn't it true that we have a lot of communities in our heads that are competing? You know, St. Paul says, the stuff I don't want to do, I do, and the things I do, that I want to do, I don't do. What's all that conflict about? And we've got plenty of it ourselves, and so we want to be better than we are, but sometimes, you know, we just don't win because we're not naming stuff right. We're not encouraged to do that. We're discouraged. You know, we're discouraged from, and we're discouraged from living this life. People want to call you Pollyanna as soon as you start really having faith, or like my friends, my family tell me, be careful giving those people living without shelter money. Be careful about rolling down your window and giving them money. I said, you know, they don't look that dangerous to me. Somehow or another, I'm not scared of them. I'm not. I haven't seen yet a person that was standing asking for money. I haven't seen one yet that I'm afraid of. There are some folks I probably need to be afraid of somewhere, but it's not them. But we've got all these things that keep us bound, and then we just fix it so that we don't have to be unbound. We make up systems of white supremacy. We tell ourselves lies. We listen to the narrative lies, the cultural lies. We're right now living in an echo chamber, and that echo chamber keeps on reinforcing. And you've got to really work hard to close it down so you can hear some truth. All of us, every one of us. And are we willing to be honest about that? And not think, oh, well, if I pull this thread of waking up, I don't know where it's going to take me, so I got to be too scared here because it might take me to having to get over something my grandfather told me. And then do I have to throw my grandfather away? No, you don't have to throw your grandfather away. Your grandfather did the best he could with what he had.
You know, you said this at the beginning of your talk, and you just repeated it now, and it really struck me both times, that one of the things about us as a church culture is we've bought the lie that following Jesus means proving that we have it all together. And I actually think that that is also part of how white supremacy continues to operate, even when the church is trying to do this work of racial justice and healing, that we often imagine, you've all heard me say before, that in the Episcopal Church, I think one of our deficiencies is that we often operate like functional atheists. So we're good at talking about God as if God is an interesting idea, but we don't often expect that God is going to show up and do something, really, acting in our lives and in our communities and in history. And one of the ways that I see even the church trying to do the work of racial justice and healing is we act like it's up to us alone to find the healing that we're all craving. We sort of count God out of the picture, which in my experience is just another way that we're trying to convince others that we have it all together. I think part of what we have to learn how to do together is we have to learn how to fall apart together. That's part of that pilgrim friendship that I heard you talking about.
And it's a part of white supremacy. It's a part of you know everything. You know, I've, good Lord have mercy. I've sat in too many rooms and I've told my white male friends, y'all do not have the capacity to ask questions. You have a DNA resistance to asking questions, because to ask a question means you don't know the answer. And I have sat in, I've run a center, and I sat in board meetings where a white male board member will pontificate for 20 minutes about something which he knows nothing about, and if he'd asked me a question, he wouldn't have made a fool out of himself. And I have to say to him, if you had just asked me that question, you could have saved yourself all of that. But it's that you're supposed to know, after all, if you are supreme and you know everything and you run the world, what a burden. What an absolute burden. And it would be just nice to lay it down and let's say, no, we got some glimpses of the truth, but we don't have all the pieces of the truth. So now I think God is looking at us saying, y'all are a funny lot down there trying to make out like you can be me. We want to be God so badly. At least we think we do. And it's getting in our way of God coming to really inhabit us. But I don't want to be bothered with that God. I'm done with that God. The God that I want is the God that walks on the path with me and weeps with me and knows about me. And I used to drive around. I raised my kids by myself, and I used to say to Jesus, when was the last time you tried to raise some black boys in Georgia? You know, because there's some things you don't know about this, and I need help, and help comes because joy comes in the morning, because God promised me, and that God is engaged with me and knows something about me and cares about me and isn't going to let me fall off the planet. And so when I meet Heidi, when I meet Bishop Loya, when I meet you all, I don't have to be afraid, because that same God loves you too, and God's bigger than me and can love us all. And I don't have to be trying to hold on to keep you out, because there's enough room for everybody here. And my relationship to God is not going to be destroyed by who you are. And that's the thing you were just saying, this notion of, that God's not big enough to encompass all of it because we're not big enough. and we won't let God be bigger than us. J.B. Phillips wrote that lovely book, Your God's Too Small, and we probably need to read that about 200 times a day to get straight in our heads that God is bigger than we can imagine. I think our biggest mistake is trying to figure out who God is and put God in a box, and God just looks like we just created some monster, little bitty monster. That's a little monster. We should have created a big one if we were going to create something. But a little bitty monster that runs around messing us up. So I've got this, I call it the heavenly kitchen cabinet company. And it's made up of Sophia, God, Jesus, the ancestors, and the angels. And that's my posse. So I don't have to, and they look out for me, and they go do the stuff that they run. God's not an errand runner, but the angels and the ancestors, the angels I think might be the errand runners. But most of us don't believe that they're even out there. That's the other problem, is a crisis of faith, I think. So
we're getting close to time. I was just going to say, do either of you have questions that you'd like to ask each other?
Oh, yeah. You want to ask me anything? I don't know.
I'll probably think of something when we're done. I think one thing that if we're almost out of time, one thing I don't want to end without, it's not a question, it's a deep and heartfelt gratitude for what you have brought to our church. You said this tonight, but I think I want to, as a bishop of the church, I think you've brought so many gifts to us, but maybe the most important gift that you've given to us is that for decades, at least in the Episcopal Church, we engaged the work of racial justice and healing entirely through the lens of secular categories. And in doing so, in many ways, we continued to be co-opted by the very mechanism of white supremacy that we were trying to recover from. And what you have brought, I was ordained bishop 12 days after George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. And I remember thinking during those days before I was consecrated that I'm not sure I know how to do what is going to be asked of me as the Bishop of Minnesota. And when I encountered you, and in our first conversations, and when I started to become familiar with your work, what I learned is that actually everything we need is in the gospel of Jesus. And you have brought that to our church, and I can't tell you how grateful I am for that personally and on behalf of our church.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. But what I don't understand is, how do we miss that? I'm serious. I don't understand it. How did we miss that? What on earth did we think was the answer? And I think growing up poor and black, I've always had to depend on something more than my wit. And I think that helped. So I had to find a God that was engaged with me. And if God didn't engage me, I don't need that God. I don't, because so what? I don't need somebody sitting, the old folks used to talk about going to heaven and walking on streets of gold and drinking milk and honey. And I'm thinking, I hate honey and milk. I don't like milk, and I can't imagine drinking milk with honey in it. And I don't like gold enough to want to walk on gold streets. So I got to find somebody who's interested in something else besides gold streets and milk and honey. And I found a God that was interested in little black girls trying to be free.
I think we are kind of at time. Thank you both so much. We're going to ask Bishop Loya, if you would accompany Dr. Meeks to the back. And we are going to have books for sale, and Dr. Meeks is available to sign.
Oh,
You've already
I'm sorry,
signed.
I've got one more thing, Heidi. I just about
Please.
forgot. Because we're so grateful to you, we have Minnesota gifts for you
Oh my God.
from the Racial Justice and Healing Commission. So I know you're going to be with us all weekend, but
Yes.
we wanted to make sure you had time this weekend to enjoy some of your Minnesota
Oh my
gifts.
gosh,
So.
thank you. I keep getting these gift bags here. I'm coming back here many more times. Yeah. And I want to thank you all for your listening hearts. Your listening hearts, because the longest trip you may have to ever make is from your head to your heart. And you brought your listening hearts. I watched your faces, and you listened with your heart. And I deeply appreciate that. It makes it worth it to me to haul my arthritic body around across the country to speak to people if they will bring their heart to the room. So thank you for bringing your hearts. So if you can leave it here. And we have to go down there. I need to have your hand.